Ruben, let me start with you. So we've got a situation here where Peeni Henare has basically doubled down on his views on repealing the gang patch law. Of course, your leader says that will not happen. So have you got a rogue MP in your party?
No, look, I don't think we've got a rogue MP at all. We're a very united team and we're very clear on this. We opposed it when National brought this as a law change. We don't think it's going to be effective. That's been proven because since the gang patch ban has come into effect, gang numbers have increased.
So why? Well, that's no excuse to repeal the gang patch law, though, is it?
But we haven't said we will repeal the gang patch law. We've said that we opposed it when it came into the House because we don't think it's going to be effective. The proof is in the pudding. Gang numbers have increased.
Vanessa, what do you say to that?
They haven't increased at the rate that they were increasing under Labour. It's definitely a downward trend, and every pressure that we can bring to bear on gangs is a good thing. Cracking down on them is a good thing. We've gotten rid of the Comancheros out of my electorate, out of Christchurch. I think that's a really good thing, and we should be harder on the gangs.
The other thing you're getting rid out of your electorate, though, the other thing you're getting rid of is frontline police. You're shutting down police stations. How's that going to work?
Look, that is a decision for the police to make, and how they're going to effectively provide community policing is up to them. They've had a very clear message from us about we want to see more people out on the beat. We want to see a bigger presence of the police, and we're giving them the tools to be able to do that. How they do that is up to them, but they need to be able to convince the community that they're going to give exactly what we ask for, which is more police out on the community.
And you convinced voters that you were going to give them 500 new police officers. That's, I think, by November this year. Where are you at on that count?
So that is something that I didn't personally do.
No, but your National Party did. Yeah. You're part of that. Where are you at?
Now, we're getting a very good, strong recruiting drive going. The numbers of police are a challenging thing, and we're doing our best. We've done more for policing and supporting our police than Labour ever did in their last 6 years. Under the last,
got a number?
A huge number of increase in violent crime. We've seen 28,000 fewer victims of violent crime since we've been in government, and that is a huge win. So I don't think that Labour can try and pretend that some way that they're really supporting the police and hard on crime. It's a bit of a joke, Ruben.
Doesn't sound like a number to me.
Ruben, in terms of the New Brighton police station. Hang on. In terms of the New Brighton police station being reopened in the station there, is that seen as a step in the right direction, considering that reception's been closed for so long now?
Look, I think having a frontline desk open in New Brighton will be good for reporting crime, and that's what a lot of people go to police stations to do. But what we actually need to be looking at is what are the drivers of crime, what's happening in the community, and what are we doing to prevent it? New police would have been part of that solution. National have failed to deliver on that. But not only that, they're pulling community policing out of some of our communities in Christchurch East that need the most support to address the really complex issues that are causing family harm, that are causing a lot of the criminal offending. And
now, you make an interesting point there that we talk about and you made a good point, the drivers of crime. But having more officers in the area doesn't necessarily solve the problems of drivers of crime, though, does it?
But if you've got a community policing task force, it does exactly that. It works alongside the community in partnership. It's not just about someone coming in and saying, that they've been a victim of crime. That's a really important thing for us to be conscious of and aware of, and to serve the victims of crime. But we also, if we're looking at the drivers of crime, we need to be in the community with highly skilled police people, working with those people who are falling into criminal offending to get in early and prevent that from happening. And what we've got here is that we're redeploying the police force. National are not delivering the increase. Vanessa hasn't given us a number. They promised 500. What actually is the number of new police officers that we've got? The fact they're not telling us suggests that it's something that they're not happy about, possibly that they don't want to talk about. And what we're seeing instead is that they're just moving the chairs around, but they're actually underserving the communities that need the most support.
That's a fair comment, isn't it, Vanessa? What do you say to that?
I say it's pretty outstanding to have someone at the same time as there's a new police station opening in their electorate can then complain about not enough community policing. And I think
not a new police station. It's a new service at a police station.
A really glass half empty kind of approach from that side. And I think that we've yet to see the final actual plan from police. We've had the discussions that are going to be happening that have finished and closed just last week. So for him to be then saying, oh, this is exactly what is happening and this is all terrible when you haven't seen the final plan, I think is a little bit premature. I think that the police can be the ones to say what they're going to be doing and how they're going to be doing it. We've given them a very clear steer about what we want and given them all the support that we can. It's a very tough time trying to recruit, and we acknowledge that. They're doing an excellent job, and I think that we should just applaud what the police have done and continue to do.
Ruben, have you put in a submission regarding these proposals yourself?
I've had really good engagement with the police, and I'm a part of a working group across a number of community sectors and NGOs that works.
Have you put in a submission? Yeah, but my question is, have you put in a submission to police in regards to your concerns?
I didn't put in a formal submission, but I've had a lot of conversations and will continue to, because that's the way that we'll shape the kind of services. But if you were concerned about the issues, and you know, obviously you're very passionate about this, why did you not put in a submission if you're really passionate about the issues going forward, considering that police put out an email address saying if you've got a submission on the proposal, make it? Yeah, and I've been across a number of the submissions that have been made, and I think that's a really valuable perspective that's been shared from a number of stakeholders across the community. So I think our community is really well represented in that submission space. What I'm curious to know is how many new police officers there are, and Vanessa's refusing to answer that question, so either she doesn't know or she doesn't want us to know. And the other question I have for you, Vanessa, is if you're so positive and think that a Frontline desk being open in New Brighton is a great thing, and I'm not saying that it's not, how are you also happy to be shutting that same desk down for the community of Littleton, and how do you think they feel about it?
You know that I'm not happy about that, Ruben, and I've spoken publicly in saying that I don't believe that that is what the community want, and it doesn't reflect what we've asked for. And I want the police to be able to explain exactly how it's going to work and how they're going to increase their presence and increase the feeling of community support and community safety. I have not been happy about that, and I've been very vocal about it.
And
I spoke to Tony Hill regarding this whole proposal about what's happening. What he was essentially saying was they're putting their resources where they need to be. So couldn't you actually flip that on its head and say it's a good thing that perhaps Littleton is low on crime, so they're reducing numbers there and putting them elsewhere?
Yeah, well, we've been through this before in Littleton. And what happens is as soon as the police disappear through the tunnel and on the other side, problems start happening again.
Right.
The police have a role to play in prevention as well. And I think that if crime drops because we've got police there, we shouldn't instantly assume that they're not needed. So the community are going to take a lot more convincing than that, I think. And so if the police end up going back and crime spikes up, I hope that the police would be willing to look at it again.
Manchester Street's a hot topic at the moment. Is Phil Major and Anayania Hansen, are they right in suggesting that Manchester Street is an absolute shambles? Vanessa, to you on that first.
Oh, yeah, geez, if you tried driving down that, it's like a slalom. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, I applaud Phil and the council team for all of the ones who are trying to make a difference and improve it, because it's absolutely ridiculous.
You've got the Banks Peninsula City Councillor saying he thinks it's a triumph and it's a wonderful thing because it slows the traffic down and it's safer for cyclists. Is that a fair point, Ruben?
If we're talking about Manchester Street and what it's like to travel down, I think the important question is, what are you travelling in? Because if you're travelling on a bus, which is what Manchester Street has really been prioritised for, you're probably really happy with the level of service and the speed that you're travelling at. If you want to travel through the city or into the city in a vehicle, a car, self-drive, then you're probably better to head for Durham Street or Barbados Street, which have got one-way systems, they've got lights in phase, they get you into or through the city really quickly. So I think the damming of Manchester Street as a street that's not good to drive down in a car is exactly what it was intended as. It's intended as an interchange for all of the bus services that come into the central city.
That's a good point, and the whole point of it was to make sure, well, in some respects is to pedestrianise the central city, but in order to do that, you've got to take the public with you. And I think the council and what was it used to be called, Otakaro, haven't they failed to take the public with people on this journey to pedestrianise and put more bus priority lanes in the central city? Vanessa, isn't that part of the problem? People don't seem convinced.
I don't think people are convinced. I think there's been a few instances where things that have been done by the plan to try and pedestrianise have been kind of philosophically driven but not very practical, and they haven't considered that actually there are ways of doing things potentially that can do both, that don't make people feel absolutely frustrated.
And that's the problem, isn't it? People do feel frustrated, but with the lack of communication or the fact that they feel things are being done to them and people aren't being seen to be working with them. Reuben, just finally.
Sorry, wanting me to comment on whether people have been worked with or whether people have had things done to them. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think another thing here is that Christchurch is not particularly well served by public transport beyond the central city. And so I think that a lot of people from the outer suburbs, particularly in Christchurch East, we've got lots of areas where we desperately need much better public transport. That means that those people can't catch a bus into the city, which means that their tendency there, if they're driving, is that they're going to be in their own vehicle, which means that those road designs aren't going to suit them as well if they come to a street like Manchester Street. Is the solution to reinvent Manchester Street so that it's car friendly? Or is a better alternative to actually serve the whole city of Christchurch with much better mass rapid transit and public transport linkages so that people can get in and out of the city for whatever they need to do much more easily? And I think it's probably that.
Yeah, the problem is, though, we're not Sydney, are we? And there's always this tension between trying to create better public transport and making sure people use it, but realising that we're not a huge city, so we're kind of in crossroads, aren't we, Vanessa?
Yeah, I think that's right. Although I agree that we do need to consider and plan for and develop more public transport, better services, and build them so that people will actually use them. I agree with that. And I think that we need to also think about where people are living and make sure that the housing density is also reflecting that, and so that we can actually build in places that make sense for people to be able to use the public transport that's available.
And that's the perfect Yep, go ahead.
Well, the other thing we've got to do is fund it at central government. We've actually got to prioritise investing in public transport for cities like Christchurch at a central government level so that people can have the services they should reasonably expect in a city of this scale. And what we've seen from this government is that funding's been taken away, cut, and the priority's gone on building new roads, not on building the kind of infrastructure that everyone can access.
Like what?
Well, like the cuts to public transport, the lift in public transport fares that have come in since Simeon initially and now Bishop were the ministers of transport, and we're seeing investment into large roads of national party significance instead
national
of
party significance. That's a good one. I'll give you that.
Instead of focused investment on a rapid mass transit and on the kind of public transport that we know that New Zealanders need and deserve.
Okay, I need to move. Yes, go ahead, Vanessa.
Different ways of funding it so that it can be funded in more. It doesn't all have to come from the government. That's what we're saying. Look, we have to look at ways that we do this. It can be funded with partnerships and with investments that are done.
Sounds like a toll road to me.
Inputs.
Love a good toll road. Just joking. I need to move on to the homeless issue, guys. This is really sad when I read this. This shouldn't be happening in Christchurch. In fact, it shouldn't be happening in New Zealand. 10 people are currently living in car parks at a local church in Avonside. Advocates say they've got nowhere to go. The council is trying to force them out. The church says they're They haven't got anywhere else to go. Vanessa, where should they go? Because there are plenty of social service agencies in this city that do get well funded in the last round to try and mitigate these problems, but arguably some have said that these people actually don't want to go to houses. They want to stay in their cars. They want to stay in their buses, sadly. So how do we help these people into better accommodation?
I mean, that's a real challenge. Homelessness has been a long-term issue for New Zealand, and nobody wants to see people who are forced to live out on the streets. This is as you say, some people have complex lives and make choices that other people might not choose to make. How we actually solve this needs to be fundamentally looking at the housing system, and the whole housing sector has been low on numbers. We haven't had enough housing units for a long time. We need to massively increase the availability of different forms of housing, whether that be apartments and blocks and single units and everything. We need to increase all of it, and we need to reduce the cost of that. We need to have a whole variety of options for people, and that doesn't happen overnight, but we are taking a huge amount of action. You've just seen us change the planning and consenting rules to make it easier to be able to build everything that we need to do. And ultimately, yes, community support is a big part of that, and we are prioritising funding towards that. There is money for people in transitional housing and emergency housing, and I heard Chris Bishop talking today just on RNZ about how the Cabinet are looking at options and looking at settings as well, because we have heard and been listening to the community sector about the homelessness issues and what needs to be done to improve.
But Vanessa, also under the current government, arguably homelessness has got worse because the government's made it harder for those to go to WINS and say that they need accommodation. That was a report. I think, in fact, it was an independent government report, wasn't it, that did suggest that. So do you kind of accept that perhaps the government's strict rules from the Ministry of Social Development has made the homelessness issue worse?
I think there's been a range of factors, and I think that report has been accepted, and they're looking at ways that they can, change the settings and what needs to change, because at the same time we have managed to prioritise getting nearly 2,100 students and young children out of motels and into social or affordable housing. They're into warm, dry homes rather than in motels that are inappropriate. So I think the prioritisation was really important, and moving families out of those and children out of those motel units was really important. And now we need to look at the settings and make sure that we can help people who are in homeless situations.
Ruben, I want to pick up on that because I've talked to many social service agencies in this city, and they say the number one issue for their clientele, if you like, is the fact that after the earthquakes, a lot of the bed sits, particularly around Phillipstown and Linwood and Central City, they collapsed during the earthquakes, and developers and builders have not built enough kind of one-bedroom affordable units for these people who would prefer to live on their own. And I see that as a massive issue. And when I'm driving down Central City and you see all these empty Airbnbs that nobody's in, I just think, how do we get to a point where we allowed resource consents for all these little tiny little wee dog boxes that are sitting empty, but we've still got 10 people that are living outside a church?
Yeah, look, and I think the starting point here that we all probably agree on is that all New Zealanders deserve somewhere warm, safe and dry that they can live in and that they can call home. And all New Zealanders want that. I disagree with those ministers who say that homelessness is a lifestyle choice or a conscious decision for people, because I just think that's an absolute nonsense. The situation at the church on Stanmore Road is really troubling to see that, but it's good to know that there is a fantastic MP, Duncan Webb, in Christchurch Central, who's working with the team there to try and come up with a solution, and that's a process that's being worked on at the moment with council, some lawyers and some planners to ensure that there's actually a good plan there. But what we're seeing across Christchurch East, and I'm sure Vanessa's seeing it across her electorate as well, is record levels of homelessness. Those NGOs that you talk about, Chris, working in the space, every single one of those that I meet with say that they've never, ever seen it this bad. And we have people coming into our electorate office who are in desperate need of emergency housing, and they're being turned down and told that it's not available. And at the same time that that's happening, there is a list of kāinga ora homes across Christchurch East, multiple bedroom dwellings, single bedroom dwellings, that are actively being released to the market and sold. So at the time that we've got the biggest homelessness crisis that anybody can remember, this government, the government you're part of, Vanessa, are selling state houses. So they're selling the very homes that we know individuals and families and young people and retired people desperately need.
Okay,
so that
Vanessa,
does not
what
sound like a plan to address a crisis. Selling
Vanessa,
houses
what do you say to that,
Vanessa? Is not a plan.
The housing market is a complete ecosystem. To say that the government has to be the only ones providing housing is to not understand the way that it works. To have there's still availability of housing if whether it's owned privately or by the government. It's like saying it's not important that developers should be developing housing as well. It's absolutely wrong. Everybody that is building houses is still building houses. It's important that we get that done. It doesn't matter who owns the buildings. It's when MSD pays for market rents and for housing subsidies for people that are in private rentals. It doesn't matter whether kāinga ora owns the housing or it's a private developer or a community housing organisation.
So you're all for selling state houses?
I'm absolutely for it, because we need to make sure that the availability of properly and well-spaced housing is there. There's a whole field in Quaifs Road that was put aside by kāinga ora for future development that has been now going to be freed up for further housing development that wasn't available because kāinga ora was land banking it. There's $1 million properties in Auckland that we're selling because actually it doesn't make sense to have a 2 to 3 bedroom old state house sitting on it. We could be actually building more intensive housing units on those places. And
so at the same time, just to be clear, at the same time that you've got people in 1 degree Christchurch winter, families and people living in buses, living in tents and living in garden sheds, you're happy to be part of a government that is selling the state houses that they can't get into.
I'm absolutely proud to be part of a government that's doing something about the housing crisis in this country. It is for the first time making bold moves in the housing sector and construction and planning and doing what needs to be done. And absolutely proud of that record. And
record waiting lists, and you're proud of it.
So let's remember how many people increased on the waiting list for housing and how many homelessness increased under the Labor government. It went up by 37,000.
We're talking about what your government's doing.
You can stand there and actually say that you're so fantastic and the previous Labor government was absolutely abysmal in this. So actually, we're doing something to clean up the mess. Yet another lot of mess that your previous government left that we are cleaning up after.
Great to see you falling back on the comms lines when you don't have an answer.
We are making this absolutely making the bold moves that need to be made to fix this problem.
Just finally, guys, the Erebus Memorial, 2 Christchurch sites now being considered. You've got the Craycroft Reserve in the Cashmere Hills and the site near the Avon River. Is there a site either of you prefer?
Well, I mean, I'm a little bit biased because the Craycroft site is obviously in my electorate. It's a beautiful spot near the sign of the Tākehē, and it's got stunning views out over the mountains, the sea, and the whole of the plains. It's an incredible spot, and whatever works for the city, the survivors, the memorial families, and everybody. I think it's important.
Reuben, preference? Do you have a preference?
Look, I don't think it's up to me to have an opinion on this. This is absolutely about the families of those who were lost in a really significant and tragic chapter in New Zealand's history. I think that this conversation our council shouldn't have to be stepping in and bailing the government out here. There should be a conversation direct between central government and those, the families of the victims of that terrible tragedy, to find a memorial and a way to recognise that significant loss to New Zealand in the way that's most appropriate for them. So I'm not going to give an advertorial for which Canterbury location I think is appropriate. It's a conversation for the families to have with central government, and it's really overdue. I'd like to see a memorial in place as soon as possible, and I think those families deserve that.